The first thing I noticed was that Sophie Lane wasn't wearing shoes. Not the rain running down her hair, not the mascara under her eyes, not the way she clutched a green overnight bag to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her bare feet were on my porch at 11:47 on a Thursday night, pale against the wet boards, and she looked at me like she had spent every mile to my house arguing with herself. Then she whispered, "I had nowhere else to go. My name is Grant Miller." I was 34 years old enough to know better than to open the door to my sister's best friend and feel my heart do something reckless. I worked as a claims adjuster for a regional insurance company, which meant I spent my days looking at damage and deciding what could be repaired. Roofs, cars, kitchen floors after pipes burst in February. People were harder. Sophie had been in my life since I was 17 and she was 15, back when she and my little sister Emily used to raid our fridge after school and accuse me of being emotionally allergic to fun. She had grown into the kind of woman who could silence a room without raising her voice. Sharp smile, quick hands, always a little too honest for comfort. And for the past year, she had been engaged to a man named Aaron Whitaker, which was why the sight of her on my porch in the rain felt less like a surprise and more like the first crack in a house I had pretended was solid. "Sophie," I said, stepping aside, "come in." She didn't move right away. Water dripped from the sleeves of her gray coat. Her hair, usually pinned back like she had a schedule to defeat, hung in dark ropes around her face. I could smell rain, cold air, and the faint vanilla perfume she always wore. "Emily didn't answer," she said. "She's at the hospital with Mark. The baby decided midnight sounded dramatic." A tiny, broken laugh escaped her. "Of course she did." I looked past her to the empty street. No headlights, no shouting. No one chasing her down the sidewalk like this was a movie with worse lighting. Still, something in my chest tightened. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head too quickly. "Not like that." That answer was somehow worse. I took the bag from her and set it inside. "Then come in before you catch pneumonia and give my mother another reason to blame me for something." That got me half a smile. I closed the door behind her, and the quiet of my house wrapped around us. Rain hammered the windows. The old floorboards creaked under her wet feet. She stood in my entryway like she didn't know whether she was allowed to take up space. Sophie Lane had never looked small to me before. "I'm sorry," she said, "for bleeding rainwater on my floor, for showing up." I grabbed a towel from the hall closet and handed it to her. Our fingers touched. Cold skin. A little tremor. I pretended not to notice how badly I wanted to hold on. "You showed up at the right door," I said. Her eyes lifted to mine. There it was. The thing I had spent years ignoring because she was Emily's best friend. Because I wasn't an idiot. Because wanting someone from a safe distance can become a habit if you let it. Sophie saw too much. That had always been the problem. She wrapped the towel around her shoulders. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why?" "Because tonight I might believe you." The rain seemed to get louder. I led her to the kitchen, mostly because kitchens made emergencies feel less dramatic. I put the kettle on. She sat at my small table, still in her coat, staring at the engagement ring on her finger like it belonged to someone who had borrowed her hand. I noticed then that the diamond was turned inward. "Sophie," I said carefully, "what happened?" She swallowed. For a second, I saw the girl who used to sit on our back steps with Emily laughing so hard she cried. Then I saw the woman in front of me soaked and shaking, trying not to fall apart in the house of a man she should not have come to. "I left Aaron's rehearsal dinner," she said. I stilled. "Your wedding is Saturday." "Was." The kettle began to hiss. She twisted the ring once, twice, then pulled it off and set it on my table with a small, sharp sound. "I found out why everyone kept telling me I was lucky," she said, "because apparently lucky women shut up when powerful families ask them to." My hands curled against the counter. "What did he do?" Her mouth tightened, but she didn't answer that. Instead, she looked at me with rain still caught in her lashes and said, "That's not the worst part." I waited. Sophie took a breath like it hurt. "The worst part is that when I ran, I didn't think of my mother. I didn't think of Emily. I didn't even think of a hotel." Her voice dropped. "I thought of you." I should have said something steady, something brotherly, something that belonged to the version of me everyone trusted. The dependable Grant, the fixer, the guy who owned jumper cables, remembered birthdays, and never wanted what he wasn't supposed to want. Instead, I stood there, with my hand on the counter and felt the whole room tilt. "You thought of me," I repeated. Sophie looked away. "Forget I said that. I don't think I can. You have to." The kettle screamed before either of us could make that worse. I turned it off, grateful for the noise, then poured tea neither of us wanted. When I set the mug in front of her, she wrapped both hands around it like warmth was a language she still understood. "I need you to tell me what happened," I said. She stared at the ring on the table. "Aaron's father pulled me aside after the toast," she said. "He wanted to make sure I understood what marrying into the Whitakers meant. I had met Victor Whitaker twice. The man smiled like he was posing for a statue of himself. What did that mean? That I would support Aaron publicly, no matter what." Her voice went flat. "That if rumors came up, I would deny them. If women came forward, I would call them jealous. If money moved through my nonprofit, I wouldn't ask questions." My stomach turned. Sophie ran a literacy program for kids whose parents worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford rent. It was the part of her life she talked about like a fire she carried in both hands. He said that? He said I was smart enough to know a good life when it was offered. She laughed without humor. Then he gave me documents. What documents? An agreement. An NDA. A resignation letter from my own organization, already drafted. They wanted me to sign before Saturday. I sat across from her. "And Aaron?" Her face changed. That was answer enough. "He knew," I said. "He told me not to be dramatic." Her thumb moved over the place her ring had been. "He said every family has arrangements. He said love was separate from business." I felt heat crawl up my neck. "Did he touch you?" "No. But when I tried to leave, he grabbed my bag." She swallowed hard, told me I was embarrassing him, told me if I walked out he'd make sure nobody ever donated to my program again. The house went very still around us. Outside, thunder rolled low over the roof. "I have copies," she whispered. "Photos on my phone, papers in the bag. I don't know what they'll do if they realize I took them." I looked toward the dark window above the sink. For years I had kept myself in neat lines. Sophie was my sister's friend. Sophie was off limits. Sophie was engaged. Now she was barefoot in my kitchen with proof that the people she had almost married into were willing to destroy her. And all I could think was, not while I'm breathing. "You can stay here tonight," I said. "Tomorrow we call a lawyer. Not Emily yet, not while she's in labor, but I know someone." Sophie's eyes filled, though no tears fell. "You're not asking if I'm making it sound worse than it was?" "No." "Why?" "Because you came here barefoot in a storm." Her mouth trembled. I pushed my chair back. "I'll get you clothes. Guest room's clean." "Grant." I stopped. She was looking at me like she wanted to say my name differently. "I didn't come here to make this your problem." Too late, I thought. Aloud, I said, "You didn't." But when I went upstairs, my hands were shaking. I found sweatpants, a t-shirt, thick socks. In the hall, my phone buzzed. "Emily," I answered quietly. "Hey, baby." A tired, happy sob burst through the line. "She's here, Lily Grace. 6 pounds, 8 ounces. Perfect." For a moment, joy cut through everything. Then Emily sniffed. "Have you heard from Sophie?" I closed my eyes. "Why?" "She called me 3 times. I miss them." Emily's voice sharpened with panic. "Grant, she's getting married in 2 days. Why would she be calling me crying?" Downstairs, glass shattered. Sophie screamed. I dropped the clothes and ran. I reached the kitchen in 3 seconds. Sophie stood pressed against the cabinets, one hand clamped over her mouth. My back window was spiderwebbed with cracks. A brick lay in the sink among broken glass, rain spitting through the hole. Tied around it with a black ribbon was a folded piece of paper. My pulse went cold. "Go to the hall," I said. She didn't move. "Grant!" "Now." This time she listened. I grabbed the fireplace poker from the living room and checked the back door, the yard, the driveway. Nothing but rain and the crooked shadow of my old maple tree. Whoever had thrown it was already gone. When I came back, Sophie was in the hallway, pale as plaster. My phone was still in my hand. Grant? Emily's voice shouted from the speaker. What happened? I forced air into my lungs. Window broke, storm caught something. Sophie looked at me sharply. Emily didn't buy it. That was not a storm. You just had a baby, I said. Hold her, breathe, I'll call you back. Is Sophie there? The silence answered before I did, and Emily whispered, Oh my God. I'll explain later. You better. I hung up before she could hear the fear in the room. Sophie wrapped her arms around herself. They found me. Maybe. Don't do that. Do what? Pretend a brick came through your window by coincidence. I picked up the note with a towel and unfolded it. 4 words printed in thick black marker. Bring back what's ours. Sophie made a small sound. I folded the note again, slower than necessary because if I moved too fast, I was afraid of what I'd do. Your phone, I said. Did you turn off location sharing? Her face crumpled. I don't know. Give it to me. She handed it over. Her lock screen was a photo of her and Emily at some beach, laughing into the wind. It hit me harder than it should have. I shut off location services, then powered it down completely. They'll go to Emily next, she said. Or my mother. Not tonight. Emily's at the hospital. Your mother? Visiting my aunt in Tucson. Good. None of this is good. No, I said. But you are not alone in it anymore. She looked at me then, and whatever wall she'd been holding up finally cracked. Tears slipped down her cheeks soundlessly. I had imagined touching Sophie 100 forbidden ways over the years. I had never imagined this, reaching for her because she was shaking too hard to stand. She came into my arms like she had been waiting for permission to collapse. I held her carefully at first, then less carefully when her fist gripped my shirt and she buried her face against my chest. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. I hate that I'm scared. Smart people get scared. It keeps them alive. Her laugh broke against me. For one dangerous second, her face tilted up. Her eyes found mine. Rain tapped the broken window. The whole world narrowed to the warmth of her hands on my shirt. Then headlights swept across the front curtains. We froze. A car door slammed. I moved Sophie behind me and crossed to the living room, poker still in hand. A hard knock hit the front door. Grant Miller? A man called. Police. Relief came first. Then suspicion followed. I looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed officers stood on my porch, rain shining on their caps. Behind them, parked at the curb, was a black SUV with no markings. One officer lifted his hand again. Open the door, sir. Sophie stepped beside me despite my glare. When she saw the SUV, all the color left her face. That's Aaron's car, she whispered. My blood turned to ice. The knock came again. Mr. Miller, we need to speak with Miss Lane. I kept the chain on and opened the door 3 inches. The older officer looked past me. We have a report that Miss Lane stole confidential property and may be in distress. She's safe, I said. The younger officer's gaze flicked to the broken window behind me. Doesn't look safe. From the SUV, a man stepped out under a black umbrella. Aaron Whitaker smiled like a groom arriving early. Sophie, he called gently. Enough. Come home. Sophie made a sound so quiet only I heard it. Not fear exactly, recognition. Like some part of her had known he would come wearing concern as a costume. Aaron stood in the rain with his perfect navy coat and his politician's face, one hand tucked in his pocket, the other holding the umbrella. Even at midnight, he looked rehearsed. Officers, I said, that man is not welcome here. Aaron's smile tightened. Grant, I understand you're protective. Sophie's confused. It's been an emotional evening. Sophie stepped forward before I could stop her. I'm not confused. Aaron's eyes landed on her bare feet, my towel around her shoulders, my shirt clutched in one hand from when she'd almost changed. Something ugly flashed under his calm. There you are, he said softly. You scared everyone. You scared me. The older officer shifted. Ms. Lane, Mr. Whitaker says you left with documents belonging to his family's business. They were given to me, Sophie said, to sign against my will. Erin sighed like she was making a scene at a restaurant. No one forced you. You threatened my nonprofit. I reminded you actions have consequences. I pushed the door wider, chain still hooked. So does throwing a brick through my kitchen window. The younger officer glanced back toward the broken glass. Erin blinked once. A brick? Don't, Sophie whispered. He looked at her. Don't what? Don't act surprised. I know how your family works now. For the first time, his mask slipped. Only a second. But I saw it. So did the younger cop. The older one cleared his throat. Mr. Miller, we need to confirm Miss Lane is here voluntarily. She is, Sophie said, and I want to file a report. Erin laughed under his breath. Against whom? She lifted her chin. You, your father, whoever tracked my phone, whoever threw that brick. Rain streamed off the porch roof between us. Erin's jaw flexed. Think carefully, Soph. I moved before I thought, one hand hitting the doorframe hard enough to rattle it. Do not call her that. Everyone went still. Sophie looked at me. Erin looked between us, and understanding crawled across his face like oil. Oh, he said. That's what this is. Sophie flinched. I didn't. This is her leaving, I said. Get used to it. The younger officer turned to his partner. We should take her statement. The older officer hesitated, then nodded. Miss Lane, can you come down to the station? She's not going anywhere with him outside, I said. She can ride with us. Sophie's hand found the back of my sleeve. Cold fingers, steady grip. I'll go, she said. But Grant comes with me. Erin's smile vanished. Sophie, you're making a mistake that will ruin your life. She opened the door fully then, sliding the chain free with a sound that felt like a verdict. No, she said. I made the mistake when I said yes. Erin took one step toward the porch. The younger officer blocked him. Sir. For one wild second, I thought Erin might push past him. Instead, he leaned around the officer and fixed his eyes on Sophie. You have no idea what you took. Sophie's hand tightened on my sleeve. I looked at the green overnight bag by the stairs. Neither did I, but whatever was inside, Erin was afraid of it. 20 minutes later, Sophie sat beside me in the back of a patrol car, wrapped in my coat now, her damp hair curling against her cheek. The officers had bagged the brick and the note. Erin had stayed on the curb, watching us leave. At the station, they put us in a small interview room with bad coffee and a buzzing fluorescent light. Sophie opened her bag. First came the NDA, then the resignation letter, then a stack of financial records. Last, from an inside pocket, she pulled a slim, silver flash drive. I didn't know this was in there until I got to your house, she said. I stared at it. What is it? Her voice shook. Erin's father told him to destroy it. The interview room door opened. Emily stood there in hospital slippers, face pale, eyes blazing. Behind her, holding a newborn in a pink blanket, was her exhausted husband. Emily looked from Sophie to me to the flash drive. Then she said, Somebody better start talking. Emily did not sit down. She stood in that police interview room in hospital slippers, one arm wrapped around herself, while her husband held their sleeping daughter like the world hadn't just cracked open. Sophie looked at my sister and broke. I'm sorry, she whispered. Emily crossed the room and pulled her into a hug so fierce the chair scraped backward. You idiot! Emily cried. You should have called me 4 times. I did. Then 5. That was when Sophie finally sobbed. The flash drive changed everything. It held recordings, emails, donation lists, shell companies hidden behind charity events and family foundations. Proof that Victor Whitaker had been using nonprofits like Sophie's to wash money and silence people who got too close. Erin had known. Worse, he had helped. By dawn, Sophie had given her statement. By breakfast, the detective's polite expression had turned grim. By noon, the Whitakers' attorneys were calling, threatening, bargaining, but the brick through my window had been their mistake. It made Sophie look exactly like what she was, a witness they had tried to scare. Emily refused to leave until a nurse called and threatened to personally drag her back to maternity. Before she went, she pointed at me. You, she said, take care of her. I am. Her eyes narrowed. I mean emotionally, not just with legal pads and coffee. Sophie looked down. I looked anywhere else? Emily, even sleep-deprived and wearing mesh hospital underwear under sweatpants, still saw too much. The wedding never happened. Aaron was arrested 3 weeks later. Victor lasted longer. Men like him always do. But eventually the people he had controlled began talking. One woman became three. Three became nine. Sophie testified with her hands folded in her lap, voice clear, wearing a blue dress and no ring. I sat behind her the whole time, not as her savior. She had saved herself the moment she walked out barefoot into the rain. I was just the door she chose. For a while, that was all we were. A safe house, a ride to court, a hand hovering near her back but never touching unless she reached first. We were careful because trauma can disguise itself as love, and loneliness can sound a lot like fate. So I waited. Sophie rebuilt her nonprofit under a new board. Emily named me Lily's godfather, then threatened to revoke the title when she caught me looking at Sophie too long at Thanksgiving. By the following spring, my kitchen window had been replaced, but I kept the old cracked latch in a drawer. Not as a souvenir of fear, but as proof that broken things could become the place light entered. One warm evening, Sophie came over with takeout and a stack of grant applications. She kicked off her sandals at the door like she lived there. Halfway through dinner, she looked at me across the table. "I'm not running tonight," she said. My fork stopped. She smiled, nervous but certain. "I'm not scared. I'm not desperate. I'm not out of options." I stood slowly. She did too. "I know," I said. Then Sophie Lane walked into my arms in my quiet kitchen, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she wanted to be there. A year after that night, it rained again. Not a storm. Just a soft summer rain that made the porch boards shine. Sophie stood barefoot beside me, laughing, as Lily toddled between us in a yellow raincoat, splashing in every puddle she could find. Emily shouted from the steps, "Don't let her eat mud!" Sophie leaned her head against my shoulder. I looked down at her bare feet, safe on my porch at last, and held her hand as the rain fell gently around us. And if a story like ours ever finds your door in the rain, I hope you open it. What would you have done if something like, "My sister's best friend came to my door in the rain," then whispered, "I had nowhere else to go," happened to you? And have you ever mistaken kindness for something your heart was too afraid to name? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.